The morning of my 32nd birthday, I was standing in the parking lot of a Whole Foods in Asheville, North Carolina, holding a bouquet of ranunculus I'd bought for myself when my phone rang. It was my mother. "We need to talk about Thanksgiving," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The specific smile she used when she'd already made a decision and was calling to inform me of it. I tucked the flowers under my arm. "Okay. Your brother wants to do it in Sedona this year." I waited. "He found this resort. It's got a private chef, guided hikes, the whole thing. He's already talked to the travel agent." I stood there in the cold November air, watching a woman load paper bags into a Subaru. "Mom, Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks. I know, but he got such a good deal. And you know how he is when he finds something he loves." I did know how my brother was. I had been knowing how he was for 32 years. What I did not say, standing there with my birthday flowers, was that I had already made plans, that I had already talked to my husband, that we had already told his parents who were flying in from Portland specifically to spend the holiday with us, that I had already put down a deposit on a vacation rental in the mountains because we were going to do it right this year. The four of us, fireplace and board games, and the kind of slow, quiet morning that belongs to people who have finally stopped trying to be everywhere at once. Instead, I said, "Mom, I can't just cancel my plans for a resort trip I didn't know about 3 weeks out." The pause on her end was short and surgical. "It's family, sweetheart." There was a time in my life when those 2 words would have been enough. "It's family. Pack your bag. Adjust your expectations. Smile for the photo. I'm Ivy. I'm 32. I work as a physical therapist at a rehab clinic in Asheville, where I spend my days helping people rebuild the strength they thought they'd lost. There's a particular kind of patience the job requires. A willingness to sit with someone in their frustration and not try to fix it too fast. My husband says it's the same patience I apply to my own family, and he's not wrong. He says it like it's a compliment. Sometimes I think he means it as a warning. My brother is 28. He's the kind of person who treats the world like a resort he's already checked into. Spontaneous, charming, constitutionally incapable of reading a room when the room contains anything resembling a limit. My parents have always called it a free spirit. I've always called it a very expensive lifestyle that somehow never runs short. Growing up, I was the one who planned things, who color-coded the school calendar, who remembered the dentist appointments, who got a part-time job junior year because I wanted new sneakers and my parents said the budget was tight. Meanwhile, my brother's guitar lessons, his travel soccer fees, his senior class trip to Costa Rica that cost what I made in 4 months at the coffee shop where I worked weekends. These things were not budget problems. These things were priorities. I didn't understand it as favoritism back then. I called it personality differences. I called it boys being more expensive. I called it normal, which I now understand was just a polite word for what I had been trained to accept. When my husband and I got engaged 2 years ago, I planned everything myself. Not because I was a control freak, but because I had learned early that if I didn't build the structure, someone else would build it for me, and it wouldn't look anything like what I wanted. We were married last April in a small outdoor ceremony in the Blue Ridge Mountains. 53 people. Wild flowers and sweet tea and my grandmother's ring on my hand. My brother showed up an hour late and left before cake because he had a thing. My parents said he was going through a hard time. I let it go. I always let it go. But standing in that parking lot on my birthday, I felt something shift under my feet. Not anger exactly, more like the slow recognition of a pattern that had been there so long I'd stopped seeing it as a pattern. I said, "I'll talk to my husband to get back to you." My mother said, "Don't wait too long. The resort books fast." When I told my husband that night, he put down his fork and looked at me with the expression he uses when he's choosing his words carefully. He's an accountant. Not the boring kind people assume. The kind who sees the architecture inside numbers, who can look at a financial document and understand what someone was trying to hide before he's finished the first page. "What did you tell her?" he asked. "I said I'd talk to you." He nodded slowly. "Your brother already paid for it. Apparently he got a deal on a private chef resort in Sedona the week of Thanksgiving." He said it without inflection. "That's what she said." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How does he afford these things?" I shrugged, which is something I have done my entire life when that question comes up. A reflex of not looking. He figures it out. My parents help him sometimes. My husband's eyes went a little still. How much help? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because when I reached for an answer, I found that I genuinely didn't. I knew my parents had given him money. I knew it was not small amounts. But the specific numbers had always been kept soft and vague, offered up as things that weren't my business, things that were between them, family support for a free spirit who was still finding his footing. I don't know exactly, I said. He looked at me, not with judgment, with something quieter. Do you remember what your grandfather left you? I set down my own fork. My grandfather on my mother's side had died when I was 24. I remembered the funeral in humid August heat, the relatives I hadn't seen in years, the paperwork I'd been vaguely aware of without being invited to touch. My mother had mentioned it a few weeks later, casually, the way she mentioned most things that mattered. Your grandfather set something aside for you, for when you need it. A house, a big life thing. I had never seen a statement. I had never asked for one. In my family, asking for documentation was the same as saying you didn't trust someone, and I had been taught that trust was something you demonstrated by not asking. I remember him mentioning it, I said carefully. Do you know where it is? The word where landed in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. My parents manage it, I said. My husband didn't say anything dramatic. He didn't raise his voice. He just nodded once, the way he does when he's decided something, and said, Okay, I want to look into something. I didn't sleep well that night, kept turning over the phrase figured it out and the specific way my mother had smiled through the phone. My husband is meticulous, the way surgeons are meticulous. Not because he enjoys the process, but because he cannot function inside disorder. Over the next 2 weeks, while I went to work and helped my patients relearn how to walk, how to trust their own strength, he quietly built a picture out of paper. He asked me for every document that existed in my name from my mother's side of the family, old emails, a scanned copy of a letter from when my grandfather's estate was settled, a tax form I had signed without reading because my father had handed it to me and said it was routine. He searched public records. He made phone calls in his lunch break. Calm and pleasant, asking questions in the specific tone that makes people answer without realizing they're giving something away. I came home one Thursday to find him at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a single printed document beside it. He looked up at me. Sit down. I sat. He turned the laptop toward me. It was a bank transfer record. Clean and matter-of-fact, the way official documents always are. The amounts don't apologize. They just exist. Amount, $54,000. Sender, an account tied to a family estate fund. Recipient, my brother. Date, 14 months ago. Memo, personal loan. There was no repayment agreement attached, no promissory note, no interest structure, nothing that looked like a loan and everything that looked like a gift, except that it wasn't a gift because it wasn't my parents' money to give. I stared at the number until the digits started to blur. That's not possible, I said, not because I didn't believe the document. Because my body needed a moment to catch up. There's more, he said. He showed me a second transfer, 18 months ago, $11,000, and a third, 2 years ago, $8,500, $73,500. Moved out of an account that existed because my grandfather had believed in me enough to leave something behind. I pressed my hand flat against the table. The wood was cold. The fund was structured specifically, my husband said, his voice careful. It was in your name. Your parents were named as trustees, but only until you turned 25. After that, the terms required your signature for any withdrawal. I was 32. They had no authority to move this money, he said, not as an accusation, just as a fact. I thought about my grandfather's hands. Big square hands, the kind that had fixed engines and built things. I thought about him pressing a folded 20 into my palm when I was 8 and saying, save the first one you earn, the rest you can spend. I thought about him saying at my college graduation, that girl knows what she wants. My throat tightened so fast it almost surprised me. They gave it to him, I said. My husband's eyes stayed on mine, all of it. I should have called my parents that night. I should have driven over and demanded an explanation in the specific loud and justified way that the situation called for. Instead, I sat at our kitchen table and felt the specific silence of understanding something you'd always suspected but never let yourself fully know. The next day, I called my brother. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to see his face when he heard the question. We met at a coffee shop downtown, not his usual territory, somewhere with no familiar furniture for him to lean on. He arrived 8 minutes late, coat open despite the cold, the effortless energy of someone who has never once second-guessed whether he was welcome somewhere. "What's going on?" he asked, dropping into the chair across from me. I didn't ease into it. I had spent 32 years easing into things with my family, and it had never once changed the outcome. "Did you take money from my grandfather's estate fund?" I asked. He blinked. Then he laughed, short and dismissive, the way he laughs when he's buying himself time. "What are you talking about?" $73,000, I said. 3 transfers. I have the documents. The laugh disappeared. Something tightened around his eyes. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter where I got it. Did you know it was mine?" He shifted in his seat, crossed his arms. "It's a family fund. It was left to me by Grandpa. In my name. Mom and Dad manage it. They managed it. Past tense. They stopped having authority when I turned 25, which they knew." He looked at the table, then back at me, and in that look I saw something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, inconvenience. Like I had just added a complication to a situation he had considered already resolved. "Look," he said, voice dropping lower. "I needed it. I was in a bad spot. You've got a good job. You've got Marcus." "That is not the point," I said. "You would have been fine. You didn't ask me." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Did you know it was mine?" I asked again. He looked at me for a long moment. Then quietly, "Mom said you probably wouldn't notice." The coffee shop kept going around us. Someone ordered a latte. The door opened and let in a gust of cold air. I sat very still and let the sentence land. She said I probably wouldn't notice. Not that I wouldn't mind, not that I had agreed, that I wouldn't notice. "Okay," I said. He frowned. "Okay," I said. He frowned. "Okay, enjoy Sedona," I said, and I picked up my coat and walked out. The air outside was cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my hands in my pockets and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not rage, not grief. Clarity. The specific clarity that comes when a thing you've half known for years finally takes a shape you can see all the way around. My husband and I talked to a lawyer that weekend. Not a dramatic conversation, a practical one. The kind that happens at a desk with coffee going cold and a yellow legal pad filling up with bullet points. The fund had documentation. The transfers had timestamps. My brother's financial history had context. The lawyer explained what was possible: demand letters, restitution, a civil claim for breach of fiduciary duty, depending on how the trustee arrangement was structured and what my parents had signed. My husband took notes. He didn't look angry. He looked like he was building something. "You don't have to pursue this," he said that night, the way he had said it about other hard things. Offering the option so I could choose it, not so I would take it. I looked at the ceiling for a long time, then I said, "If I don't, this is just what my life is." He nodded, like he'd already known that was the answer. The next 2 weeks were quiet in the way that pressure is quiet. My parents called with cheerful updates about the Sedona resort. My mother texted me a photo of the villa layout. My brother sent a message asking if I was coming, no reference to our coffee shop conversation, as if it hadn't happened or he'd already decided it didn't count. I didn't respond to any of it. Not in anger, just in the new discipline of not pretending. The Thursday before Thanksgiving, my mother called. "We haven't heard from you," she said. Her voice was airy, practiced. "I know. Are you coming?" "No." A pause. "Ivy. Mom, you took money from Grandpa's fund and gave it to my brother. Money that was legally mine. Money that required my signature to move." Silence. "I know about all 3 transfers," I said. Her inhale was sharp. Then she shifted gears the way she always did, from warmth to ice in one smooth motion. "We were managing it appropriately. We know what your grandfather intended. The paperwork says what he intended. And it says I had to sign. You always make everything so complicated." Her voice had gone cold. "We did what was best for this family. You did what was best for my brother," I said. Like always. She hung up. My father called 20 minutes later. He didn't bother with warmth. He never did. Your mother is upset, he said. She should be, I said. You're threatening your own family over money. I'm asking for money that belongs to me to come back. That's not a threat. That's a request. You have no idea what your brother has been through. And you have no idea what it costs to watch your whole life be less important than his. He went quiet. Then, you've always been dramatic. And there it was. The family verdict. The word they reached for when facts became inconvenient, dramatic, difficult, too sensitive, making it a thing. The demand letter goes out Monday, I said. He hung up. Thanksgiving that year was the four of us, my husband and me and his parents, in the rental house in the mountains that I had already paid for. We made a turkey that was slightly too large for the pan and ate it anyway. His mother taught me how to make her cardamom pie. We played cards until midnight and his dad fell asleep on the couch with the dog and nobody minded. It was the quietest, warmest holiday I could remember. My brother texted me a photo from Sedona. Blue sky, red rock formations, his face tipped back in a laugh. I looked at it for a moment, then I put my phone face down and went back to the card game. The demand letter went out as planned. My parents responded through their own lawyer, full of language about trustee discretion and family intent, and the deeply unfortunate nature of litigation between family members. My brother sent me a long message that used the phrase "you're tearing us apart" 4 times and did not once use the word sorry. My lawyer responded. Methodically. The paper trail was clean. The trustee arrangement was explicit. My parents' authority had expired 7 years ago, documented and verifiable. What followed was not cinematic. There were no dramatic courtroom moments. There were phone calls and letters and a long, uncomfortable Tuesday when all 3 of them showed up at my parents' house and sat around the kitchen table with their lawyer and worked out what returning the money would look like in practice. My husband sent me a text from outside the meeting. It said, holding the line, "Be home by 6. I spent that afternoon with my patients. A 67-year-old man relearning how to climb stairs after a hip replacement. A teenager who had convinced herself she would never run again after a knee injury and was, that afternoon, running. I held the stopwatch and watched her cross the room and felt that particular therapist's pride that is quiet and professional and mostly consists of keeping your face calm so you don't make it about yourself. The money came back, not all at once, not gracefully, in an installment agreement that my lawyer made sure had real consequences attached. My mother called it humiliating. My father said I had shown my true colors. My brother said in a voice message I listened to once that he hoped I was satisfied. I was not satisfied. I was not satisfied. I was not vindicated. I was not triumphant. What I was done. Not done with grief. You don't grieve a family the way they actually were without it costing something. I still thought about my grandfather sometimes, about the fact that he had tried to give me something solid, something that said, this one matters too, and the people who were supposed to protect that had looked at it and seen a resource. But I was done chasing, done softening, done translating my own needs into language polite enough for them to hear without discomfort. I stopped calling first. I stopped sending the text that opened the door. I stopped performing the version of myself that kept everyone comfortable at the cost of keeping myself invisible. My mother reached out a few months later. A card, not a call. Careful handwriting, the kind she used for thank you notes. She said she hoped we could move forward. She said family was important. She said she missed me. She did not say she was sorry. I put the card in the drawer and did not respond immediately. Not because I was punishing her, because I was finally, for the first time, taking the same amount of time I needed as I had always taken for everyone else. One evening in spring, my husband and I were sitting on the back porch of our house watching the light go across the hills. He had a beer. I had tea. The kind of ordinary evening that doesn't get photographed because there's nothing to prove. He said, "You doing okay?" I thought about it honestly, the way I've been trying to do instead of just saying yes automatically. "I think so," I said. "I'm still sad sometimes. That makes sense. I thought it would feel different, getting the money back. I thought it would feel like something got fixed." He looked at me, nothing got fixed, it just got honest. I sat with that for a while. The hills went from gold to gray. A bird crossed the sky somewhere high up. He was right. Nothing got fixed. My brother did not become someone who could look at a thing that belonged to his sister and decide not to take it. My parents did not suddenly see decades of tilted scales. The money came back, but the reason it was taken didn't go anywhere. That was still there, small and stubborn, buried in the foundation of everything we'd called normal. But something else was there too, now. A boundary that wasn't performative, a limit that didn't depend on their agreement. A marriage that had held up the hardest kind of truth and not flinched. People sometimes ask me if I regret pushing back. If it was worth it, all the lawyer letters and awkward silences and holidays redesigned from scratch. I tell them the truth. For most of my life, I made myself easier to love by making myself easier to ignore. I called it being low maintenance. I called it keeping the peace. I called it what my family called it, which was being the good one. But the good one was just the quiet one. The one who asked for nothing and therefore got nothing and was supposed to feel grateful for the stability of that arrangement. My grandfather had tried to tell me with everything he had left behind that I was worth something solid, that my future deserved a foundation. I just had to be the one to finally build it. I used to think the hardest thing about my family was feeling invisible. I was wrong. The hardest thing was finding out the invisibility wasn't accidental, it was convenient. For a long time, I told myself that my parents just had different priorities, that my brother needed more, that I was capable of handling things on my own, which was true, and they knew it was true, which was exactly why they let me. The people who ask the least get given the least, and everyone calls it fair. What my husband found in those bank records didn't just show me where the money went. It showed me the architecture of something I'd been living inside without ever seeing the walls. Every time I shrugged and said my brother would figure it out, every time I signed a document without reading it because questioning felt like accusing, every time I called a boundary dramatic before I'd even drawn one, I was participating, not in the theft, but in the conditions that made the theft feel safe to commit. That's not self-blame. That's just the honest accounting of how these things work. People don't take from you because they're monsters. They take from you because at some point, the taking went unnoticed, and then it went unchallenged, and then it just became the way things were. My brother heard my mother say I probably wouldn't notice, and he believed her, because the version of me they both knew had never once proved her wrong. The money came back, not because they felt guilty, because the paperwork had teeth, and my husband made sure those teeth were visible. What my parents called humiliating was just consequences, introduced to a system that had never had any. What my brother called ruining everything was just me, for the first time, not moving out of the way. I think about my grandfather sometimes, not with grief, mostly, with something closer to gratitude. He tried to leave me something solid. He tried to say with everything he had that my future was worth protecting. The people who were supposed to honor that decision looked at it and saw a resource. But the fact that he tried, that he put it in writing, that he named me specifically, that he thought about what I would need before I knew I would need it, that still means something. What I learned from all of this isn't that family will disappoint you. Most people already know that. What I learned is that the willingness to finally be disappointed honestly, without softening it into something more comfortable, is its own kind of courage. It doesn't feel brave in the moment. It feels like standing very still while something breaks. But on the other side of it is something I hadn't had in a long time. Room to breathe. Not because the situation was resolved. Because I stopped carrying the weight of other people's comfort as if it were my responsibility. My husband held the line when I didn't have the words for it yet. That matters more than I can say cleanly. But what I want to remember, what I want to keep, is that the line existed before he drew it. I just had to decide it was worth holding. Some things take 32 years to understand. That's not a failure. That's just how long it took me to stop calling the walls normal and start looking for the door.